Did you see the movie Air?
Yes.
Okay. The Nike story is great. And I obviously, I'm a huge Michael fanboy and all that kind of stuff. But the whole story of Nike is what I preach all the time, which is it's all about longevity. So here's this company that's stumbling along. They're losing on every front. They're basically, other than a tennis shoe, they can't compete. And all of a sudden, they take a shot with a rookie kid. And this is where success is. It's about longevity, staying in business for so long. And then it's about marginal. Like you take this crazy marginal shot where you have no freaking idea in the world that Jordan's going to be that good or that this shoe is going to take off. Hello, everybody. I'm Tom Sosnoff, and I'm here. Truth or Skepticism with Dylan Radigan. Mr. Radigan, how are you?
I'm very good. It's nice to see you. Happy summer. I saw you've been going to some baseball games. You've been doing some sort of, they say the best thing about winter in Chicago is the summer. And so I'm assuming that you're enjoying that.
Chicago was last weekend was Lollapalooza, although I wasn't there. I was at the Cubs game. Tonight, Springsteen's right, at Wrigley, and it's all in the neighborhood. The whole place is up for grabs. This is
every day, baby. You got to drink it up because you know it's not going to last.
One of the best cities in the world in the summer, no question about it. So
it really is. It really is.
Anyway, so
as you know, I've returned to this Italian situation that I found myself in, which is rarely the center of the global news cycle, as we know, although oddly sometimes it is, although not always for the best reasons. And if you were to fire up your Bloomberg terminal today, what you might find is at the top of your news headlines is the Italian Prime Minister, of all people, has invoked a windfall profits tax on all Italian banks because she feels they're making too much money. And she's put a price cap on the airlines, especially the low cost, like the Ryanairs and the EasyJets and these guys, because she feels that the airline ticket prices, the summer ticket prices for whatever tourism, are too high. So the Italian Prime Minister decided, today, yesterday, and sometime in the past day or two, that the banks are making too much money and she's going to assign a windfall profits tax, and the airlines are charging too much money and she's going to put a price cap on the amount of money that they are allowed to charge. And, this is a sort of thing that gets talked about sometimes, I can't really think of the most recent example, but I'm sure during COVID, there were some examples or during hurricanes are the most obvious when it's a price gouging on water or gasoline or whatever. But it's very rare that you see, a prime minister, a president, a national leader of a G7 country, albeit granted it's not America, but it's still considered it's one of the founding forces, the largest army in Europe, all these things, and just come out with real sort of, I would say not free market concepts where there's a political decision as to how much profit a bank should make. There's a political decision as to how much an airline should charge. Needless to say, the banks have been annihilated. The stocks are getting destroyed, blah, blah, blah. Is there ever a situation in your mind, or what is the situation where it's appropriate for political leadership to establish price controls? Now, this is something, by the way, we've had in America for years with utilities and the regulated utilities, and Enron was an example of sort of the absence of price. We lifted the caps and it became rolling blackouts and all that. So again, there clearly is abuse that happens when there's not some sort of price control, but the typical price control we know is competition. And you're like, oh, well, if you don't like this one, then you try this one, and it's cheaper, and you get the thing. And so I'm interested in whether there's any position where we're like, I know you're not going to obviously like price caps and price controls, and who would? But are there circumstances where it makes sense? Do you think a move like this is basically suicide for this prime minister? When you see this sort of insanity, it's just an extreme action. She's saying, okay, Tasty Trade, you made too much money. We're giving you a windfall profits tax of 50%.
Okay,
Ryanair, you get it.
All right. So there's a lot to there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I don't know that much about this Italian prime minister because I didn't know this was the direction you were going today. But I thought she was hardcore right wing.
She is, but hardcore right-wing populism with a little bit of Trump in there, which is that she's defending the little guy from getting, she's like these rich bankers. Remember the banker is always a good enemy for the populists.
It sounds more like it doesn't sound like that at all. It sounds like,
well, it's one of those, it's like it goes like a horseshoe, it goes around and goes from Bernie Sanders to.
Yeah, it's almost, there's a little bit of socialism in there. It's beyond populist. But
it's being presented as right-wing populism by the prime minister. I agree with you. It's not right.
That's the furthest thing from right-wing populism, but at least in my opinion. But airlines are, the hard thing about airlines is in a perfect world there would be a lot of airlines and there'd be a lot of choices. But in reality, there's not a lot of airlines and there's not a lot of choices. And when you get to Italy, there really is, there's one crappy domestic airline. And then you basically rely on, EU discount carriers like, Ryanair and EasyJet. I mean, you pretty much, those are your only choices to get around, because you can't rely on Air Italia. I mean, they're just brutal.
They're bankrupt and then they reform. I mean, that whole thing, that's a whole,
they don't even fly to Chicago anymore. I mean, it's like, and there's basically no way to fly around. So, I feel like it's kind of a crappy thing to do because I feel like there's already, the problem is there's so little competition, but, inside of Italy, but these outside airlines, these EU airlines, the discount carriers, at least, I don't know what the whole deal is. I don't know how hard it is to get gates. I don't know why there's not more competition. Like, I don't know any of the.
But again, but it sounds like you're saying sometimes price controls are more. I mean, the fact that you're going here where you're like, oh, well, tell me about how many gates and tell me.
Well, here's the problem. I don't want to make a blanket statement that price control, because we do have price control in certain areas in the US. Like we do have it in things like you mentioned, in utilities. We do have it if you consider like cable also as almost a utility, so there are price controls in different areas. Like, I mean, if you grew up in New York, you're very familiar with rent control. There are a lot of price controls in various parts of kind of in the fabric of the U.S. Economy and things that we've just come to accept. But generally speaking, we are not going to be in a situation where you're going to say, oh my God, we're going to put outside of something that's private, like you could get away with it in like some sporting league, like the NFL, if you wanted to put a certain, wealth tax on something, or, a luxury, they call it a luxury tax on, baseball teams or football teams or stuff like that. I think it would be impossible because even though we have such a broken corporate tax code, I think it would be impossible to tax a certain industry with kind of like a wealth tax, or
because the most interesting, because the airline thing is sort of good for the headline, but the major story in Europe is the collapse of the European banks or the Italian banks stock prices because of this windfall profits tax. There have been a number of times when people on the left in the United States, the most obvious being Bernie Sanders, not in the recent history, but in the somewhat intermediate history, calling for windfall profits tax on the energy companies.
Well, that's what China did on their tech companies and destroyed market share. I don't get it at all. Like the beautiful thing about capitalism, specifically in the U.S., is that windfall profits breed competition. Like money just flows to money, and so everything in this country, wherever there's windfall profits, just there's so much money chasing that space that it gets oversaturated and it gets disrupted. It's very hard to do that in Italy because there is no money chasing, like it's almost impossible to break into, the Italian banking.
Forget it. I mean, it's
exactly. These are these are licenses and institutions that have been held for, centuries at this point. I remember once we were managing money for Banco de Napoli, and don't ask me how, but Scott and I were managing a U.S. And Italian index fund for Banco de Napoli for an advisory firm that we owned, and it was a really interesting, relationship because they had never created their own funds before, so we built the funds for them, the index funds for them, and they loved it. And we spent 2 years building all this stuff, and then one day they sold the bank overnight and fired us the next day. Like the new company just said,
and the funds never saw the light of day.
No, the new company just absorbed everything. Like we were gone. Like they literally announced the deal on, through the newspapers. Like we had no idea they were even up for sale. And the next day, they're like, sorry, man, we don't control the bank anymore. They were gone literally in one day. And they said, get rid of every single outside relationship. Like it wasn't us; it was just every single relationship they had, every single money manager,
all the vendors,
every single vendor they had was gone the next day. And we'd spent 2 years putting this together. We didn't make we barely didn't make a dime on it. But it was fascinating just learning about how people invest in Italy. And I told you all the time we have a couple of huge trading groups in Milan and in different parts of Italy that trade options in the U.S. and we love it. But it's just the whole market structure system in Italy and the whole capital raise. I mean, I feel like it's I feel like it's a century behind.
Oh no, for sure it is. I didn't even intend this topic to be Italy-based so much as just using the example.
I understand. I understand.
The windfall,
The problem, the only reason I was saying this is because the reason that I guess a windfall tax can be more accepted in Italy is because there's no other way to disrupt that business. Like it's essentially, it's a variety of monopolies. There's nothing you can do to disrupt it. In the U.S., you can create competition. And because money flows to create competition wherever there's an imbalance of wealth or an imbalance of what's perceived to be, free money or whatever. And
excessive or whatever.
Excessive, yeah. You don't really get much of that anywhere else in the world. I thought you were getting there in China, but they shut it down. And I don't know, I will say it's a very strange, I find, considering who the prime minister is of Italy, I find it an incredibly strange kind of directive.
You're saying that windfall profits taxes on banks and price caps on airlines doesn't strike you as right-wing populism?
It does not strike me as right-wing populism at all. Not by the definition of right-wing populism. That is not what we call draining this.
But now I'll tell you what. I mean, not that I don't want to go too far down the Italian rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there's a fact like she has a coalition. It's a parliamentary system. And one part of her coalition is the group that considers themselves to be, the Italian populists,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
The farmers and
No.
And those are the ones pushing for the tax. Like, it's not just that she's a conservative. I'm saying the subgroup of her coalition.
Of course. And those are the people that, I mean, when you think about it, what does the middle class or below in Italy, what do they care? I mean, of course they want caps on airline flights, and of course they don't care what the banks make. It means nothing to them.
That's why it's a political victory for her.
I understand it,
right?
But it just goes against, it's not, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
At least she's not.
But nothing in Italy makes sense. How did she ever get elected in the first place anyway? I mean, she's like the worst person.
I can tell you how she got elected because I was here last summer because Draghi was the prime minister who was widely loved, and Mr. G7 and Mr. ECB and sort of the future, the professionalization of the Italian government, all this nonsense. And all the taxi drivers went on strike last July. All the farmers went on strike last July. And when the transport infrastructure and the farming infrastructure stops working and demands a vote of no confidence on the prime minister,
There you go.
you're done, sir.
Yeah.
You, sir, must leave the building.
That's one of the things I do love about the parliamentary system. There's
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you can pull anybody at any time. You're like, listen, I may not be able to decide who the president's going to be, but I sure as hell can decide it won't be you, sir.
We lost confidence. Well, the great now, I would like that to be the way that, we should have a parliamentary system that runs all the businesses and the publicly traded companies. We should have a parliamentary system that that runs sports teams and everything else. Because as soon as you lose confidence, hey, you're out.
I mean, Joe Biden would have been done years ago. Donald Trump. I mean, all these people.
Everybody. That's I mean, it's okay. You're only as good as your last quarter, your last 6 months, whatever it is.
Half the CEOs would be tossed.
Of course. I personally, I've always been a fan. But
So anyway, this one came in on that. Enough. It's just rare that the Italian government is in the front of the financial news, and so I thought I would take advantage of their position. But I almost feel like you're like, okay, windfall. You're willing to take a meeting about a windfall profits tax. That you will not wholesale eliminate that as an option on the table.
It depends, but 98% of the time, I would eliminate that as an option on the table.
But not 100%.
There are situations, and I'll give you an example. There are situations where, like, I'll give you the most classic example would be like a drug. Okay, you remember that pharma dude, whatever his name was, Martin?
The pharma bro, Martin Schreckle.
Whatever. So like when they raised the price of a type of medicine, a pill from,
I think it was insulin or some such thing.
Whatever, something like that. They go from $50 to $5,000. Okay. Yeah, I have a problem with that. Especially if it's something that we need to keep people alive. Yeah, I have a real problem with that. That's gouging. That's different. So in that case, yes. But if you're just talking about somebody that's been crazy successful, like, do I have a problem with Apple raising their prices by 3% because they're already a $3 trillion company? The answer is no.
But you do have a problem with the Apple's App Store. Because I can remember how delighted
I do have a problem with the Apple App Store, but I've been waiting for somebody to disrupt the Apple App Store.
And there was somebody that we talked about a couple of years ago on this program. I don't even remember who it was. It was some video game company.
Yeah, it was.
Remember there was something.
Yeah, it wasn't active. It wasn't active. I think it was Blizzard. No, it was. I thought it was whoever does World of Warcraft, but I can't remember. But yeah, they went after.
Somebody took a shot.
Yeah, somebody took a shot. Yeah. But they took a shot not to build a competitor. They took a shot at the fee structure. I think I can't believe there hasn't been basically, there's a lot of things in American capitalism that I'm surprised haven't been disrupted. Real estate commissions are one thing. I know that people have tried, but real estate commissions, the Apple App Store, the 30% number, those kind of things. I just feel like I'm surprised they haven't been disrupted yet.
Why do you think that is?
Cable fees. I don't know how much money it really takes to go out and, to really change
because
that.
I think everybody looks at real estate commissions and can't explain why that spread has not collapsed.
Well,
not that we're going to solve that today.
People have tried to offer, cut it in half, offer one side only. People have tried to, self-listing at 1%, but none of them have survived. So it's been tried, probably not by the right people. Like when the big firms, when an At Properties or some, I don't know all the names of all the Century 21, like when one of those firms lowers price,
Compass.
Compass, then it will change. But until that, like it took for brokerage commissions, it took for Charles Schwab to go to zero, and then everybody goes to zero. That's the whole thing.
Although I felt like you went to zero before Charles, I felt like you were very instrumental, not to toot your horn.
We were instrumental in lowering the cost of derivatives trading significantly, and closing trades and things like that. But we didn't do a lot of stock trades, so going to zero didn't mean anything, for our customers.
Mm-hmm. When you look, I'm going to set aside Italy, and I'm switching. Okay,
go. Switch.
Because I've been thinking about something that you said in your speech in London back in June, which is, and I'm sort of also combining it with something you told me about some of your self-directed investments, meaning companies you didn't found, in enterprises that you didn't do. At one point you said to me, you said, listen, you may have been exaggerating, but you said, listen, every time somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, give me a couple of bucks for this restaurant, or give me a couple of bucks for this movie or some other boondoggle, you're like, every time it works, it doesn't work. You're like, I can't tell you how many times I bet a nickel on some idea that I wasn't in control of, and it comes back a goose egg or down or whatever it is. At the same time, in the London speech, the most important thing, or one of the most important takeaways that I had from your talk, was that the existential variable is time at risk. That the more you can continue to take risk, the more opportunities you have to take new risk and new opportunities. That the key to success that is that. In other words, that the difference between success and failure is razor thin, and one of the big determinative variables is the amount of time that you can remain at risk to allow yourself the chance to be right. And I'm just kind of curious how you reconcile your own experience with investing in whatever it may be, where things have not worked out, with your recommendation to maintain a position at risk. In this case, obviously, more as it relates to trading the actual financial markets. I'm not so much interested in, restaurant startups, and how to maintain a mentality, because I guess what I'm getting at is you lose money a lot. Right? Like, you have to have a mentality that can allow yourself to be like, oh, that one was a loser, that one was a loser, that one was a loser. But you have to believe each time that it's going to be a winner and that it can be a winner. And you have to have the discipline to remain at risk long enough to allow one of them to become winners, which inevitably they will become. And I'm interested in the mental condition that, enduring a losing streak, basically. Think of it like a baseball player who's in a slump. The mentality of enduring successive 10 different I tried 10 different biotech companies, or 10 different tech companies, or 10 different oil companies. And they're all losers, but I want to keep playing. And how do you sort of manage your mental health in that situation?
Well, it's really hard, because it was easy. First of all, if it was easy, everybody would do it. And it's crazy hard because very few people get enough chances to try all that stuff, and B, success. And I talk about this all the time, but success is so marginal, like meaning that there's the line between success and failure is you almost can't see it. It's almost like chalk. And it can, if you step on it, it goes away. If if the wind blows, it goes away. And so the difference between success and failure is this incredibly tiny, like, people think it's this, there's this huge, people think that there's this obvious, it's so apparent, it's so obvious, anybody can see it, that this was going to be successful. And yet, there's no way anybody knows. It's just so crazy. And outlier success is even that much harder. And I kind of feel like, and I've always talked about this, that the key to, success is really longevity. And it's understanding how marginal success is, and how hard longevity is. Like, just doing something like, did you see the movie Air?
Yes.
Okay. The Nike story is great. And I obviously, I'm a huge Michael fanboy and all that kind of stuff. But the whole story of Nike is what I preach all the time, which is, it's all about longevity. So here's this company that's stumbling along. They're literally stumbling along. And, they're trying to compete with all the bigger companies. They're getting they're losing on every front. They're basically, other than a tennis shoe, they can't compete. And all of a sudden, they take a shot with a rookie kid, that they have no idea, because there's a lot of first picks in the draft that turn out to be complete busts. Take a shot with a rookie kid, and this is where success is. It's about longevity, staying in business for so long, and then it's about marginal. Like, you take this crazy marginal shot where you have no idea, no freaking idea in the world that Jordan's going to be that good, or that this shoe is going to take off. And all of a sudden, it changes. You become one of the biggest companies in that space ever. And, it's 100x what you think it's going to be. That's what success is. Like, you just don't know. And, you keep your head down.
Right, but the point in that story, most interesting part of the story, going to my question, and just in thinking about this, is sure, the lovely part of the success you described, but it's all the years before Michael Jordan, right?
Exactly. It's longevity. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's all those I'm interested in the mental condition.
Yeah. So just like
how many sneakers can you launch and fail, and now we lost on this one.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying what these guys were debating in the movie, which I'm sure is true. They're like, listen, why would we bet on one guy when we can bet on three guys? We could take three rookies for the same amount of money. Why would we bet it on one? And then over the years, look at all the people that we've lost money on. This guy, every single shoe we create, nothing makes any money, or running shoes were the only thing that whatever they were even breaking even on. So that's the whole thing. And that's the same reason that we do what we do. That's why we get involved with, 100 different investments, and then, one or two hit, whatever it is. And those are the challenges. And personally, it's even harder, because personally, it's easy when you're taking money that's not money you need to live on, or it's not, it's not part of, let's just say, I don't like to call it disposable, but it's money that you can afford to lose. That's one thing. But the money that you can't afford to lose, and those shots that you take, that's really hard. And, and that's where we've, over the years, that's what we've kind of at least figured out what works for us is just, is understanding that how marginal success is just the difference between, us making it and not making it. It's just incredible.
I mean, Ned, do you have, I find that when I have a string of bad trades that just stick to trading, or that I inherently start to become more cautious and somewhat more pessimistic. And I'm a very optimistic person, and I'm a very resilient person. And at the same time, when there's a string of successes, I tend to become more optimistic. And I just feel like one of the great sort of psychological insights to traders that are vastly, better than I am, is in that psychology of being less influenced. It's like a batter that it doesn't matter whether you struck out or you hit a home run your last at bat. It's a new at bat. It's a new set of pitches. It's a different wind speed. It's a different everything. Are there any tricks? Is there anything like that you like? Because you've had more longevity, more success as a trader than most.
I think that successful people just they expect that they're going to be they expect success, and anything less than that. Crazy story. I'm at the Cubs game on Sunday, last past Sunday, and the Braves have a player. He's one of the best players in baseball, Ronald Acuna, and the Cubs pitcher. Okay, the Braves have bases loaded, and the Cubs pitcher hits him in the back. And the guy, now this is with bases loaded, so the Braves scored a run. And Acuna looks at the pitcher like he wants to charge the mound, because he's so mad that he got hit in the back with a curveball, not a fastball, it was a curveball. So it didn't hurt him at all. But he's so mad that the pitcher hit him. But yet They had bases loaded. No pitcher in the world is going to hit a batter with bases loaded. It just doesn't. Nobody's going to give you a run. Okay, so you're never going to hit a batter with bases loaded. Like, so obviously it wasn't intentional, but he's such a good player that he just felt, I cannot believe this guy hit me, and he's mad that he didn't get a chance to hit
because he wanted to hit a grand slam.
Because he wanted to hit a grand slam, exactly. And that's the difference. Like that is. I looked at him like, this guy, he's the most confident player I've ever seen. Like you get an RBI for getting hit. You get an RBI. You don't have to do anything. He got an RBI. He was still mad. He didn't want that RBI. He wanted 4 RBIs. He wanted to hit a home run. He wanted to change the game. He was so mad. And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I don't know if I've ever seen an athlete since Jordan like that, that just wanted to just, destroy you. And I thought it was cool, but I guess my point here is that, that somebody with that level of success and that level of skill, just treats things differently than, some other person at the bottom of the order would have been ecstatic to get hit and get an RBI.
But so then how does that relate to a trading mentality?
Well, it's the same thing. Good traders, trading is just a function of longevity as well. I'm not a better trader than the next person, than any one of our customers. I mean, on a screen, we're all the same. I might understand some of the mechanics a little bit more, but I don't know what's going to happen any more or less than anybody else does in the whole world. So other than pushing a button faster or whatever, or, there's a few nuances that maybe I understand better, but I don't think I'm a better trader than anybody else. The difference is I have a lot of longevity. So I'm able to process things that don't go right, and versus things that do go right. And I have the confidence that as long as I add duration to what I'm doing, I'm going to be successful.
But it's interesting, not to make this sort of just a referendum on you, because obviously the key to longevity is to keep any given position relatively small.
Yeah.
Right. That's the whole small trade-off. But at the same time, you love to tell the story. I forget what it was, whether it was when you were starting Thinkorswim or something else, where you and Scott were like all in, when you were betting up, you were doing anything but trading small. You were trading as big as you could get.
Sometimes.
And Warren Buffett would say, not to go to the other end of the spectrum, he'd be like, listen, we'd say, I've got 5 companies. If I'm good for $1, I'm good for $1 billion. Like if I like the company, I want to be deep all the way into this thing, or else I don't want anything to do. I want to be big, or I don't want to be in at all. Sort of the opposite kind of mentality. And I'm interested how you manage the distinction between the discipline and logic of small positions to add longevity.
It's the things you can control.
With betting up.
It's the things you can control versus the things that you can't. The things that you can control are the businesses that you run. The things that you can't is what is the market going to do? So the whole concept of trade small, trade often is, we can control order entry, but we can't control ultimately what the market's going to do. When you're investing in yourself and you're investing in your own business, you feel like, okay, I can't control the economy, but I can control my business. And so, we're confident, so we go all in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a fair distinction. It's a matter of.
But I will tell you that one of the things, Dylan, that's really strange in business that I've learned over the years is that people have a very hard time with that distinction of, hey, I can control this versus everybody thinks that they're thinking about something that they believe is going to happen. And I don't like to bet businesses on that. Like, that's why everybody says to me, well, I think this is going to be a great business because of X. I actually like businesses where where the only stuff you bet on is whatever you can control. So like when we build something, we build it all about what we can control, not the stuff that we can't control. And I think that that's a really important distinction that I think a lot of people miss when they're building stuff. I think in the world of entrepreneurship, that is one of the most important distinctions. Hey, control what you can. I'll give you an example. Like if you said, like if you're running your own business, you can control your own expenses. Like that's something you can control. But what you can't control is how much business is in that particular, like if you're selling ice cream.
That vertical. What ice cream demand looks like.
If you're selling ice cream in Chicago in the winter, you can't control how many people are going to walk through the door to buy ice cream in the middle of winter when it's below zero. But you can control how much money you're going to spend to run your store. And I think that people don't really grasp that about business, and that is probably the single reason that people fail. Is that same person running the ice cream store in the winter says, you know what, I'm just going to market heavier, or I'm going to spend more money to try to bring more people in to raise my revenue, when you really can't, because you can't control that. What you can control is exactly how much money you spend.
All right, to the markets we go. Last time we spoke last week, you were like, "Listen, I'll be short I would short the S&P I would short the Nasdaq 100 for the rest of the year."
Yeah.
A week has gone by. The Nasdaq's a little weaker, so whatever. It's more or less unchanged, but it's down. I don't know, a few percent.
Yeah, it's down. Yeah.
You still hold that position? Like you still feel like the markets. That the pot odds to the downside are much better than to the upside?
I feel like the Nasdaq is, and again, nothing's changed since last week. Okay. I feel that the second half of the year, the Nasdaq's going to be really challenged in going significantly higher. Yes.
But you don't necessarily think that you're not predicting, not that you're ever in the prediction business. So I won't even put that word out.
I don't think it's crashing. No.
Yeah. But it's that it'll sort of meander, but it's unlikely to go much higher. Your whole point is the chances it keeps going higher are low. Everything else is who knows.
Yeah. That'd be my bet right here.
Are the banks in the weeds at all here? I know there's a Moody's downgrade. I mean, like, is there another round? Is there going not to go all the way back to the First Republic or whatever? I forget that other one this winter, the Silicon Valley one. Like, are the banks in the weeds here again?
Well, there was just like last week, Fitch downgraded U.S. debt, which we all agreed is just kind of a PR move for Fitch. And then I think Moody's just downgraded all the banks in the U.S., regional and small banks. Just based on competition, things like that. What's so funny to me is, why are you downgrading banks when interest rates are high? Wouldn't you want to be downgrading banks when interest rates are super low? Like it just seems to me to be so counterintuitive. If interest rates are highest they've been in, let's say, 5 years, and you're looking at your potential balance sheet as a bank, I mean, you have so much more optionality with rates at 5 and 6% or 5.5% than you do, and so many more opportunities for revenue than you do when interest rates were zero. Why wasn't Moody's downgrading banks when interest rates were zero, and why are they downgrading them now when they're at all-time, multi-year highs in interest rates? So that's one thing that I don't get at all. So I would think the banking environment right now is much more interesting than it's ever been, at least for 5 years. So I don't really get it.
What of that they're locked in on long-term low interest loans, a la Silicon Valley or First Republic? That basically that they're inverted, that their funding costs are high, and that their coupon payments coming in are low because of long-term lock on 2% mortgages and all this crap.
Well, I mean, they spread those things off. I mean, I assume 99% are spread off instantly.
Yeah.
If you're a bank, why would you ever loan money at 3% unless you could immediately buy it back at 2 7/8?
Right.
Like you're not lending money for 30 years at 3% because you think it's a good trade. You're lending money at 3% because you can buy it at 2 3/4 or 2 7/8, and you're just locking in 1/8 of a point on $250,000 for 30 years. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason you do it. That's the whole trade.
You're just clipping the fee on whatever you originated for, and whatever.
Yeah, you're clipping the fee, and then you're just hoping that your asset prices stay bid, because so you don't have to deal with foreclosures and taking delivery. But what are you doing? That's the whole mortgage trade is an eighth to a quarter, right? That's all it is.
Sure.
There's nothing else there. So I don't understand if rates go to like 6% and your eighth and a quarter go to a quarter and 3/8. It has to be a better trade. I mean, maybe you have more principal risk now, but at least they're not getting burnt on it yet. So I don't really understand why these banks would be less attractive today. I just don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Do you view rates as done? Are they done in your opinion?
Yeah, I think they are.
And is there a shift in your trading position overall relative to that?
Yeah,
and what is it?
Well, we're long some bonds right now so we're betting that rates come down a little bit. Not a lot, but just a little.
And that's purely as a futures, like a futures or a futures options, or would you also use a TLT kind of?
No, futures options.
Futures options.
Yeah. Our rate position our bond position hasn't changed. So far, so good. It's all right. We're not making any money. We're not losing any. We're kind of like waffling around, but I'm expecting a big move second half of this year.
Long bond, short the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it if only because it's clear, it's easily understood, it's easy to believe.
Yeah.
It might be wrong. It might be wrong, but it's easy to believe.
Well, if I'm wrong, it won't be the first time. But hopefully I can last longer than I can make it. The duration I can last is a lot longer than the duration of the trade. Well, listen,
I'm sure
we've run out of time here, Mr. Radigan. I'm Tom Sosnoff. He's Dylan Radigan. This is Truth or Skepticism. Fun discussion today, Dylan. Let's talk next week.
Watch out for that Italian prime minister, that right-wing populism. They like price caps and windfall profits. Somebody's got to tell. I don't know who the right-wing populist in America these days is, but it's a new take.
Who is the right-wing populist in America?
See, because all the American politics is predicated on things that have nothing even to do with the economy. It's like
I don't even know
woke, not woke. It's all these other idiotic. It's
No. Right-wing politics in America has come down to like just pure stupidity. But who's the right-wing populist? I don't really know.
It used to be Ron Paul, right? I mean, and you might argue. I mean, Ron Paul's long gone. I'm just saying that was a theoretical.
I don't even know who would be today.
I would say Rand Paul, only because he's Ron Paul's son, and I haven't heard from him in a few years, so I don't really know either.
Praise the Lord. All right.
Stick week.
Thanks, Dylan.
All right.